We're back today with another special guest to interview, and that person is Joel Murray, who works for the FIEC. Working within this national organisation, Joel has got direct experience with working with large number of churches of all different sizes and types, and all the stories and experience that comes with that. So we're really excited to hear what he has to share with us today and be ready to take notes of things you can put into practice.
Welcome to the Gourds and Pomegranates podcast, talking common sense for church communications. Here's Hannah and Joe.
We are very excited to have with us today Joel, who is the Media and Communications Officer at the FIEC. So we did a bit of digging and it turns out that the three of us have actually been in a room together before.
Nice.
Turns out I know, it's very exciting. Turns out we were all at the Digital Church Toolkit Summit in November. I mean, Joe and I knew we were there because we intended to meet them. So were you there on site or just watching online?
Yeah, real life. Got down to London. It was a nice little day out.
Yeah.
And I did bump into one person I knew and got to meet some other new people as well. So it was really good, yeah.
Oh, well, it was exciting that we were in the room together then. And it's so exciting. Yeah, it's so exciting to have you here today with us. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Happy to be here.
If you have listened before, you will know that we have some very insightful questions to ask you to get to know you a little bit. So first of all, what is your favourite biscuit?
The favourite biscuit, if it's in the barrel in the office, is a chocolate hobnob.
We've had that before.
The perfect mix. The mix of melty and crunchy. But if you're going posh though, you know when you get those posh boxes and you get the circle biscuits that have got chocolate that are thick all around. That's the real favourite.
All about the chocolate, not about the biscuit. Are they Foxes, the ones which have got like all the chocolate around them in the circle?
Unless you go to Aldi, they probably call it like wolves or dogs or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, they are pretty good.
They have a similar thing, yeah.
Favourite social media platform then, if you have one?
Yeah, I tentatively will say X. Although that feels weird. I don't know. X/Twitter.
We can put anything in there then.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Mm-hmm. I've used it for a long time and I find it's really good for connecting communities, in particular football. So I'm a Leicester City football fan. And if you can, I can follow a football match on X, on Twitter, much better than anywhere. Unless you're watching it in real life, that's the next best place because you can see what people are saying, you can see what's happening, live updates, you can see people's opinions and stuff, and then you can talk about it all afterwards. So I really enjoy doing for that. Although Instagram is probably my favourite, mainly because it's just much more positive than anywhere else, especially Twitter. Yeah, but it's designed to be positive.
You've reverted back to calling it Twitter.
Yeah, I know. Well, it is Twitter, isn't it?
It is.
Instagram is designed to be positive and inspirational, which is just a better place to be, I think. So yeah, I'll go Instagram.
But I think there is something about, like you say, that community and the real-time nature of that community that you can have those discussions. And like, I'm not sure that Threads has quite got that yet.
No.
But we'll see. Maybe it'll get there.
Never know.
So favourite podcasts, are there any that you listen to regularly?
Yes. The podcast that I will always go to whenever there's a new episode is Knowing Faith.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, it came out of the Village Church in the US where Matt Chandler's the pastor. There's three of the staff there started this podcast. I think only one, Jen Wilkin, is still there. The other two have become pastors and started their own churches. They still keep going. And it's just it's a very conversational podcast where they talk about theology and church life, but just in a really authentic and friendly way. And their idea is theology and community. So they're trying to example that you don't have to be an academic to study the ways of the Lord, but you can just do it with friends. And that's what they're trying to do. So sometimes they do topics. Sometimes they do a series through a Bible book. So Knowing Faith, that was always my number one recommendation if anyone asks me.
I'm fairly sure that that's on my subscribe to list, but doesn't actively get listened to. Like I subscribe to it because I see it and think that looks great, and then I never actually get around to it.
Yeah. Well, you should.
Yeah, I will.
You'll have to. Good.
And then the big question: gourd or pomegranates?
Well, if I'm right in knowing what a gourd really is, in the kitchen behind me, we have a chicken casserole cooking, and I'm fairly sure something slightly related to a gourd will be in there. So I'm going gourds.
Nice. One for the gourd team.
Amazing. Thank you so much for answering our super quick fire questions. Could you tell us a bit more about your background? So how did you get to where you are today? You know, is communications something that you've always been interested in?
Well, the place where I am today in terms of my kind of day-to-day life working at FIEC is more really of my faith. That's the main reason why I'm here. So I grew up in a Christian family. My parents kind of took me to church and told me about Jesus, and I was baptized as a teenager, and that was kind of me growing up. I just God is God. That's just how it is. It didn't particularly have an effect on my life, but then going to university was when it kind of kicked on. And you get the opportunity when you move away to university to say, okay, is this really me, or is it just what I do for my parents to keep them happy? Because I'm deciding for myself, and I did decide for myself, and that's when my faith really grew. Going to church, finding out for myself, how does it really affect me in my real life, in my day-to-day life, get involved with the CU and involved in the leadership there as well. I met my wife, who is Hannah, met her at university as well at the CU. I always say CU is not a dating agency, but there's plenty of marriages that come out of CU. So you never know. We've had 2 kids, got 1 kid on the way. We lived there in Lincoln, which is where we were students. And I was studying media production. And then when we graduated, I managed to did a couple of internships in the university and nearby, and then got a job working for Visit Lincoln, which is the tourism agency. Right. But I was brought in to do digital marketing. So this is kind of 2013, when social media and digital tech was kind of just really kicking on, and they saw the opportunity and thought, we need someone who has some sort of experience and knowledge to help us do it. So that's why I was brought in, to help out with the website, to bring up their social media, think about different ways to sell Lincoln as a place for people to come and visit. So I was working there in digital marketing. That's kind of where I learned about marketing, learned about communications, about sales, really on the job. So I studied media production, which was the kind of practical side of producing stuff and writing and creating. And then, working in digital marketing there in the tourism industry is where I kind of learned about marketing, communications, and enjoyed the idea of speaking to people, sharing messages, and then those having effect on people. Yeah. And so in the...
seeing that direct impact.
Yeah. And in the instance of tourism, people being persuaded to come and visit, and then telling us how much of a good time they had afterwards. Yeah. So I really enjoyed doing that. And then this was about 2019 now. The job for FIEC came up, and various people sent it to me from different places and directions. Like, I couldn't escape it. Everyone kept saying, you should apply for this, you should apply for this. And of course, it meant uprooting my wife and 2 kids from our life that we built together for 10 years. I moved to a new place, and all the uncertainty that would bring. And leaving the safe job that I was in for something else that I didn't really know about. But I ended up coming to the idea that, well, if I was going to say no to this opportunity, then what would I say yes to if God was to call me somewhere?
That's fair, yeah.
If not there, then I'm just saying, no, I want my way, not yours, which is what I came up to. So we followed in Matthew 10:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you, and kind of trusted that and went for it and said, we're going to seek the kingdom and then trust God for everything else. So that was the job that I took. There's not many jobs in communications in the church world. I've come to realize. I knew that anyway, but certainly now there's not many jobs like this at all. So I'm really privileged and blessed to be able to do something that I enjoy, something that I love, but doing it for the church, doing it for the kingdom of God. 6 weeks after I started, it was the pandemic and everything changed.
Okay, but, that's timing.
Yeah, I mean the guys there at FIEC have said that they weren't prepared to do the pivot to online at all. So they definitely see it as God providing me to help them to do that just in time for it, that's amazing to know. Good to know.
Yeah. Wow. So stepping back a little bit, for those that don't know about the FIEC, Could you tell us a bit more about it? I mean, were you aware of the FIEC before you joined?
I think that my understanding of FIEC was similar to the majority of people in FIEC churches, which was, I knew it was a thing, but I didn't really know what it was or
Okay.
why it was a thing.
And has that changed now?
It's definitely changed now.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? FIEC stands for the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches. So the way I would say it to someone who has no idea about it is that it's a charity, which is a network of independent churches across the country. So independent churches are churches that run their own kind of life. There's no power exercised over them by denomination or anything like that. So they make their own decisions. Usually it's voted in by the whole congregation, not all the time, but usually that's how it works. And so it's all the local church, and then they decide their own decisions to be able to serve their local community that the church has been brought into. The danger of independent church is that you become isolated and you become your own little church off on your own, and you think everyone else is against you and you don't trust anyone and you feel like there's no one to support you. So FIEC's job really is to bring those independent churches together so they can help one another. Connecting the church leaders especially, so they can support each other, pastor to pastor, women's workers and youth workers and all that kind of stuff. So we do a lot of that connection stuff through events and networks and emails, things like that. And then we produce resources for the church leaders as well. So that's where a lot of my work comes in, to help produce the resources and then to let people know that they exist so they can be used and they can be helpful to people. And then we also run events through the year as well. So our main event is our national conference in November, which is 1,000 people.
Wow.
And it's held up in Blackpool. So they're all different church leaders from all across the country who come for a 3-day conference. And then we do other ones. We do some for women in ministry. We run one for people who are considering starting ministry. And then we run very local ones. There's about 30 of them through the year as well, to try and do that really local connection for churches. We want churches to be independent but interdependent. So they run their own thing, because that's what we kind of biblically think is the way to run a church, but also they support one another as the universal church as well.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense. It's a lot of talking.
It does.
So tell us a bit more about your role then. What does day-to-day promoting these resources and events look like?
Yeah, our main way that we have a library of our resources, which is our website, fiec.org.uk. And that's where everything is. So you can kind of search by theme and category and keywords to find things that might help. So we do have a web development team who kind of look after the website and make any changes like that. But I'm kind of the curator and trying to help them make the website work. So one thing that we find is that people can't find the things they're looking for, usually because they arrive on the homepage and they expect it to be there. And when it's not, they think, oh, can't find it. So we're doing some work with the menu and stuff like that. So do a bit of work with the website in that sense. Do a lot of kind of copywriting and editing. Mm-hmm. So when someone sends a resource through, just kind of touching it up and tweaking it and maybe moving it around to help it make a bit more sense and be more helpful to people. We do some kind of high ticket video production. So that will include working with a contractor who's a kind of video maker, helping come up with the brief together for that, and then going and kind of helping set all that kind of stuff up. And then afterwards, writing the descriptions and all that kind of stuff to go onto YouTube and wherever else it might be. And then one of the main things that I've done since I've been working here is to set up our own podcast, which is called Independence.
Cool.
And our aim is to get one episode out per week, which we've managed to do just about for nearly 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November. So that's really good. So organizing those episodes, figuring out what we're going to talk about, who's going to talk about it. We film it and then record it on audio as well. So doing some of that editing, putting that together, producing that for YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else that might be, and then trying to get it out to people after that. I think that's kind of the main part of my job at the moment. It's quite high intensity, but it reaches a lot of people and we get so much anecdotal feedback that it's been really helpful, and people look forward to the episodes and they found them helpful and they'll be able to put them into practice. Yeah. So in that sense, it's ticking a box for us to make sure that it's being helpful to people to help them in their church ministry.
And I know that you've got like an email list and social media presence as well. Is that something you're directly involved with? Because I'm getting a sense there's a mix of sort of direct hands-on doing stuff and then the sort of one step removed producing stuff and sort of facilitating for other people to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know what the split would be, but part of it is producing and making sure what's been written or filmed can be seen and is presented well. So that's mainly where the website comes in, and to a certain point, YouTube and thumbnails and stuff. But then the next part is, well, we could produce all the resources, but if no one knows about them, then they're useless, really. So you need to make sure people know that they exist and where they are. So that'll be on emails. We find to our audience, in terms of church leaders, email works really well. So we get a high open rate of emails. People click through and reply to them, which is really great, which is something that didn't really work so well in my previous job, which is more kind of marketing and sales. So that's another conversation maybe.
Yeah.
We do share on social media as well to try and hit those bases, so we can kind of share the content out to people to make sure that they see it. I always kind of think, if you get from a point where someone doesn't know that your content exists to the point when they start to engage with it, then you might have to hit them at multiple times. So they might get an email on a Monday, see it and think, I'll do that later. But then it takes a tweet and a Facebook post and then someone sharing on WhatsApp, then finally they think, okay, now I'm going to go onto it. Yeah. So trying to think about the different ways that we can reach people is, part of my job.
Yeah, I mean, we were sharing before we started recording about sort of the podcast and how you might get people who subscribe on YouTube, even though they actually consume it on a different platform completely. But it's just, I do the same with my social media and the different things that you follow on different platforms and reaching people in those ways. I guess it's interesting that you've observed that email is a bigger platform for you guys and reaching people that way. Yeah. But also that people, it's not just a one-way thing, that something that you might imagine a bit more on social media where you post and get comments and that sort of thing. Actually, you're having that with email marketing, which traditional, it's just one way in mail outs and that's it.
Yeah. And I think to a certain point, as especially things like Twitter has become more divisive, some church leaders are stepping away from social media to a certain point. That's what we found. Or at least they're not posting and engaging. They're just kind of lurking and observing. So that makes it more difficult to try and engage with people in that sense. But I think a lot of church leaders work on emails because that's how they speak to their congregations. So one thing I often say to churches in their communications is you need to understand where your people are. Yeah. So if you find that the people you want to speak to in your church use Facebook a lot, then a private Facebook group would be a good opportunity to be able to talk to people about what's going on in the church. But if people don't use Facebook, then it's not really going to work. So you need to put your effort elsewhere.
I mean, not to bring the mood down too much, but you mentioned that you joined the FIEC just before COVID. And that was obviously a big pivot. You know, without this being something which we could probably talk about for hours, what did that look like, both in terms of what you were doing with the FIEC team, but also with what you noticed for churches? Yeah,
so we were before my time, I assume we were producing resources as we do now. There were things going on, a lot of written stuff, some video stuff, and then when everyone had to kind of disappear and stay at home and go online, it was clearly, as we all know, for church leaders especially, a huge pressure had been put on them because it was such a change for everybody, and a lot of them were struggling. Like, what on earth do we do? How do we run our church when we're not allowed to meet, when we can't speak to each other and stuff? So we pivoted in that sense to try and serve the leaders in a more intense way. So the way that we did that was through doing some webinars, which we did every Wednesday lunchtime. I'm getting all the memories flooding back of our Wednesday lunchtime webinars now, and setting them up, picking a different topic that was specific to do with lockdown. So we touched on things like evangelism during lockdown and kids ministry and went online, and things like copyright for online and lyrics, which was a big thing at one point. Can we show lyrics on our live stream, all that kind of stuff? Things like domestic abuse during lockdown that was so hidden, that kind of stuff. How do you care for your people in that sense? And we were all kind of learning and making up as we went along. But I mean, as FIEC, we had the space and the time to think about it harder. So then that's kind of what we intensely went on to do, to think about these kind of really difficult things, think through all the different permutations, and then try and talk about them and just make a space to talk about them for church leaders to help them give us space and ask the questions that they felt like there was nowhere they could go to. We found that was and
that's quite a far-reaching thing, isn't it? Like, I think we often think about it from a communications point of view in terms of the individual churches and what they were doing, but obviously communications was one small part of what churches were doing. Maybe it was a bigger part than it usually would be, but it was only one small part, where all those other things, those pastoral situations and everything, it's amazing that you were able to, like you say, have the space to think about those areas and then speak into them. Yeah,
and to share and to try and help others share their experience as well. So thinking about communications, one really helpful webinar we did was with a big church down in Waterlooville on the south coast, and they had been live streaming for years beforehand. So they kind of knew what was what in terms of what equipment you need, what works best, what you need to think about that's not just pressing play on the live stream, other things that you need to think about. And then to bring him in, guy Phil Brown, who's at Cowplain Church, and to just share his experience, so that then the other churches that were like, okay, we have to live stream now, what on earth do we do? They could kind of learn from what he had already been experiencing through the church ministry that he did. Yeah, so that was really helpful to try and think, again, who can help others, and then kind of be that interdependence that we're trying to do as FIEC.
Yeah, rather than have to have all the answers yourself.
Because we didn't have them, and no one did really.
Yeah. I think that was one thing that was really good from the pandemic, was everyone being slightly more willing to learn from each other. So you did kind of, when someone had some resources, they'd share that out, and, you'd learn from different denominations or different places, because we were just all learning on the go kind of thing. And it was sort of, this worked well for us, here, try this. It was a nice time for collaborative working.
Yeah. We did hear that we had other guys who were from churches that weren't in the FIEC network who were joining the webinars and they were finding it helpful as well. And I know the Church of England, for example, did some digital webinars as well that I was able to join and found them helpful as well. So it was a really good kind of time of sharing all together.
Yeah.
So now that we've moved out on the other side of this huge shift, where churches were forced to think more seriously about digital and online avenues, what are you noticing that churches are doing differently with their comms at the moment? Are there any trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this question earlier on. One of the main things that I've noticed is that there's just a bit more confidence that churches have now to do things online. I think, like you mentioned before, that people were more willing to learn because we didn't really know. And I think a lot of churches realized during lockdown that you don't have to have massively high production value to do photos and videos online. Actually, just a piece of camera can be really effective, even if it's just kind of a selfie almost.
Sure,
a lot of churches they were okay with that. They realized that people are okay with that as long as it's helpful. It doesn't have to look amazingly amazing. So they had a go at that. And now that we don't have to be online, a lot of churches still are, which I think is good. But just in terms of producing things online, in terms of videos and thinking more intensely about that, I think the churches have got more confidence to do so, and not kind of worrying. Maybe that was one of the things that put them off beforehand. If they weren't doing that before the pandemic, they thought, I just can't. It's too much. It's too hard. But now that actually we can do it, and technology is becoming
given permission, or maybe just an excuse to explore these things.
Yeah, as technology is becoming more affordable and easier to use, then it's just kind of enabling people to do that. So that's been really good to see. I think one trend which I'm seeing a lot of churches doing, which is a good thing, and I try and persuade them more, is to make use of the sermons that have been recorded. So a lot of churches who are live streaming their sermons, they've got the video content already of the sermon because they live streamed it, and now they can use that to chop it up, to bring out some kind of points or some particular parts from the sermon that they can then share online afterwards. I think that's really helpful because it keeps the conversation going. So it means that it's not just you turn up on a Sunday, you listen, and then great, off I go on to my normal life. But actually, it helps to continue that conversation, to continue the teaching, to remind people of that, because so often we can just forget what we hear and what we've learned. And I think, digital has been a good place to help remind people in that sense. And also, it's a way to show people more of what the church is like. Yeah. And you can say, join us on Sunday. But actually, if you can show what a Sunday is going to look like through video and photos and things like that, then that's going to be more helpful to people to know what to expect, and to encourage them to join in and come back again.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that sort of repurposing of content that they're already doing, that feels like a kind of an optimization. So something that they started out of a necessity.
Yeah.
Whether or not they sort of were thinking, let's keep this on forever, but then they've realized there's something good that can come out of that and refine that. And so going on from that, I mean, churches tend to have pretty limited resources. We've alluded to not being able to spend loads of money on production equipment and all that sort of thing, but also not just financially, time-wise, volunteers, that sort of thing. So are there any tips that you could think of that can help churches know where to focus these things, that the chances are they do have some budget, financial or otherwise, but where is best to focus it in terms of their communications?
Yeah, I think one thing I would say is that your website is really key. And maybe you haven't got a huge amount of budget put towards your website, but I would suggest that you should do, because if you're looking outside of your church family, outside the walls of the church, you might say, then the first place today in 2023 that people are going to look is to search online for a church. So if you're moving to a new place, or if you're going on holiday or something like that, or whatever it might be, if you're thinking that you want to move church, then the first thing you're going to do is look to search online. So a website is going to be a key thing for that, to let people know what you're about, to draw people in and to encourage people to come and join in. So, and websites are so important in that sense. If you go onto a website and it's a bad experience, and straight away you get put off, no matter what your church is like in reality. So it needs to be able to do that. You can do as much social media as you like to a certain point. But my opinion is, if you don't have a good website, then it's going to have a restricted effectiveness. So websites would be a key one. I think in terms of having things on the website, I mean, I've listened to some of your episodes about what to have on church websites as well, so people should go and listen to that in terms of the stuff that should be on there.
Self-plug.
Yeah, that's it. The key one I always say is to have real photos and videos. Yeah. So have real photos of the church is just so much more authentic, and you can just tell that it's more authentic in real life. And smiling faces as well. You might have to encourage people and persuade them to be involved if they don't like their photos being taken. But if you can get smiling faces, then that's always going to be a good way to draw people in and to help people to feel welcome. I think something that you mentioned as well about what we've already got. So if you're already live streaming, you've already got a sermon that's been videoed. So make use of that. And it might take a little bit of time or note taking during the sermon, if the first time you're listening, to decide what parts of it you could clip out. But clipping out 2 or 3 minutes here or there is a really good way of keeping the conversation going and reminding people about the church, about what the church is all about.
And it's relatively easy.
Yeah.
It doesn't require too much time to do.
Yeah. As long as you know what part of it you want to clip out, or why you want to clip that part of it out, then yeah.
And I guess as an extension of that, if you're saying, okay, here's something you're already doing that you can make more of, just making a list of all the other things you're doing so that you can have a clear picture of seeing what else you could repurpose in that way as well.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I would suggest as well is to look at your Google business listing as well. So if you have a church building, not all churches have their own church buildings, but if you do, then you will be on Google as a business listing, whether you like it or not. And usually it'll just have maybe an address and a name, and then nothing else. It'll say, do you manage this property? Click here to join in. And if your church is there, then that's such a quick and easy way to let people know more about where you are, especially thinking about localities and serving the people and the places where you are. If people are searching church in Liverpool, for example, there'll be a whole list of them coming up. If you don't have a Google listing, then you're going to be down the list at that point.
Yeah.
So that's
and
really
especially
good
on mobile as well, because obviously if you're on your desktop and that's kind of shown over to the side, then you might click on the church in the sort of search results.
Yeah.
But if you're on mobile and you see that before you even get to the search results, the amount of times that I will Google a business, a restaurant, a cafe, whatever, and instead of scrolling down to find the right one to click on, you just go onto the Google business and then click website and it will take you there. That's a really good quick win.
It's not ideal, but it's just how it is. So you got to work with how it is. And then the good thing is that the nice photos you took to go on your website, you can then add onto your Google business listing as well. And you can add them onto your social media account. So you can kind of, the stuff you've already done again, you can reuse. So just think about that kind of stuff. The one thing as well I would always suggest to people is about planning. If you're trying to do things reactively and kind of firefighting and even every day thinking, okay, what should I post today? It's going to take up so much more time and mind capacity to be able to do that. But if you can plan ahead and say, okay, we've got this event on X date, a month before I'm going to do this and 6 weeks before I'm going to do this, then you kind of, to a certain extent, you can plug it all in and schedule it in advance, or at least you know before the day what I'm going to post today. And that kind of stuff is going to save you a lot of time. So even just like one day of planning a term can save you a huge amount of hours going down the line because you kind of already know what you're going to be doing.
Yeah. So, I suppose that kind of takes us on to, whilst there is all the opportunities and things, but there are things that people don't do to make life easier for themselves. What are the biggest challenges that you think UK churches are facing right now, sort of with their communications?
I wonder whether the options available can sometimes not help churches. So we've got all these different places where you could be posting, and generally you think social media is where I need to go. So you think, okay, I better go onto Facebook, and then we need to have an Instagram account, then okay, and then we better TikTok. I don't really know what it is, but we better have a TikTok account then. Yeah. And actually that can be detrimental to a church because it spread you too thin to a certain point. As I said before, if none of the people you want to reach are on TikTok, then there's no point even trying to go on TikTok because they're not going to see it anyway. So that kind of stuff, I think, can be detrimental to a certain point. And I think the same thing in terms of churches thinking they need to post so much stuff out. If they haven't thought ahead what they want to post, it can quite easily end up just being a list of things that we're doing. So this Wednesday we're doing this, join us. This Sunday we're doing this, join us. This weekend we've got this event, join us. And that isn't particularly helpful or inspiring, especially if you want to draw people in who aren't already part of your church community. Because if they're part of the church community, they probably know that stuff already. And you don't need to convince them to join you because they probably will do anyway. Yeah. And it becomes the kind of church billboard, which I don't think it's the most effective way of doing that communications. Sometimes people do need to know that information. I think that's where your website will come in and people will find the website for that thing. But I think that balance between the information that you're sharing on communications and the kind of inspiration that you're sharing on communications, they go quite well together. I didn't plan that, information or inspiration. But I think inspiration in terms of a ministry of communications is more important. So telling stories about people in the church and how their faith has affected their lives and how the faith has helped them, sharing what people have learned through a recent sermon series. So you could say, we're doing a series in Mark, join us on Sunday. Or you could share a story of someone who's learned something in Mark and it's helped to give them more confidence in their work, or it's helped to quell their anxiety doing certain things. That kind of story is going to be much more inspirational and more helpful to people when you're trying to communicate what your church is about, rather than just information. So yeah, I think, the challenge is that we kind of know we need to communicate and we need to be in these places. So we do what the first thing comes to our head, which is tell them what's happening. But I think, getting that balance of stepping back and thinking about those inspirational stories and messages more so is going to be more helpful to them. Yeah.
One thing that you said there about the sort of the constant join us reminds me, I think it was just today, I saw an Instagram post from I'm Danielle Davis. I'll put a link to that in the description. And it was some suggestions for how to rephrase things, which might seem like a really simple thing, but actually it makes a difference that you're not just saying the same thing all the time. But I found it quite funny that there was obviously some sort of localization to it. So she's based in America, and one of the suggestions was bring your crew along. And I thought, I'm not sure how that would apply in the UK, full stop, but especially to like some of our more conservative churches. I'm not sure that they have a crew, if I'm completely honest. Yeah. But I like it.
Sometimes language has a thing in that as well. So that example of join us, it feels quite natural, but it certainly says that there's us and then there's you.
Yeah.
And if you come to us, then you'll be fulfilled. And that it's not intentional, is it? But that kind of language can also potentially be a bit unhelpful.
Yeah. So I like how you said the information and inspiration. So on an inspiring, slightly more positive note, what excites you as a big opportunity for churches and their comms right now?
The things that really excite me in terms of communications are the stories that I'm hearing of people who are coming to faith online. Yeah. So we have one story of a student who's at our church in Leicester who during pandemic kind of had the what is life about? So those kind of questions that were going around all over the place that lots of people had. And it led her online searching for questions, searching for answers to the questions she had, led her to sermons, and it drew her into believe that Jesus is the answer to the questions that she had.
Awesome.
And that was all through pandemic. And that's such a good story. But then church is the next step. Because once you believe, we're not saved just to be individual believers off on our own, but we're saved to be part of God's family and be part of the church. So that's a massive opportunity for churches, because there'll be people in your area that are asking the questions and maybe finding the answers online in ways that has never happened before. And then it's kind of then up to churches to be able to reach those people. And communications is the way that happens. So it happens to be that this girl looked online to say church is near me and found one. And that's how it worked. And then she came along, and then there's someone that she recognized from university there. And then, one thing led to another, and that was that. So that's really, really exciting opportunity. I think that churches are the end point for those stories that are happening now that have never happened before. Before, thanks to digital comms and things online. Something probably related to what we said earlier on is about that kind of availability of technology as well. So it's never been as easy to make videos and to create things online, to share with people, to send your message out. It's never been as easy as it ever has been before, because things are cheaper to use, because things like YouTube and social media can reach so many people that you've never been able to reach before as well. So that is a massive opportunity to do so. I think one thing to caveat that is to think about targeting. So Facebook is a really good example, and Instagram to a certain point, because you can target people in your area. So say you're in the west of Liverpool, for example, you can send a targeted message out to people in that area that you want to reach. And that's a really effective way of doing it, rather than sending it out just to the world and hoping someone sees it. You might reach 1 million people, but if they're spread around the world, then not many people are going to come anywhere near you or engage particularly with you, because you're not so relevant. But if you're the church down the road, and then someone sees you online and sees what you're about, and then that's going to be much more effective to do so. So, availability of that technology, and then the ability to reach people that you would never be able to reach before, is a massive opportunity that's never happened.
Yeah. Well, that's a very inspiring note to end on.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Joel. If people want to find you or find out more about you or the FIEC, or about indeed the podcast, where can they do that?
Well, FIEC is fiec.org.uk.
Please, in the name, really.
Yeah, pretty much. Or just search online if you can remember what the acronym is. We just put up our resources and things that we post up there each week, so it's always changing. We put all those online as well. So if you want to follow on social media, there's at the FIEC, because someone else took FIEC. There you go. We'll share all the stuff on there. If you want to follow me, then I'm on at Joel Murray, pretty much in all the different kind of places that you want to. I like to be an early adopter, so grab that handle before anyone else does.
Yes.
And I'll share some stuff from work, but mainly it will be Marvel, Star Wars, Leicester City Football Club, or pictures of my family.
Lovely.
So there you go. I try and be positive as much as I can be.
And the name of the podcast again?
Yes, the podcast. It's called Independence. And tagline is the FIEC podcast, just in case. So they're all on the website. So on the website, you can see the video, and then you can click all the links to Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever else you want to listen. Or you can just obviously search on your podcast app and it'll turn up there as well.
For sure. And we will put some links in the description as well to all these things.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Joel, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Appreciate it.